Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Silk Narratives podcast. My guest for today is joining me from Beirut. She's known for her love of color, art, design, fashion, and for her incredible ability to turn shabby into chic. She has worked with incredible designers and collaborators such as Harvey Nichols in London, the Victoria and Albert Museum, Paul Smith, Sonia Rykiel, Comptoir Libanais, just to name a few.
Rima, what would you like to know now that you have me all to yourself?
I have so many questions, so I would advise you to be patient.
And yeah, Akid. I'm sure you want to know lots of secrets.
Yes, yes, give me all the secrets. So, Rana Salam, it's such a pleasure to have you, to get to meet with the queen of Arab
Yeah,
pop culture herself.
it's lovely to meet you. And it's the whole serendipity of connection between Chicago, Vienna, Beirut, Miami. It's lovely now that we're all virtual and on the cloud. We can meet like this.
Rana, there's a question I always start with. So, away from achievements, titles, who is Rana Salam?
Oh my gosh, who's Rana Salam? My gosh. That's a wonderful question. I never actually thought about it. What makes Rana Salam is the first word that comes to my mind is passion. Passion and totally relies on serendipity. I'm led by serendipity and spontaneity. I am not somebody who calculates anything. But bizarrely now at 56, I feel like life was kind of bizarrely planned in a funny way, although I always thought it's serendipity, but when I connect the dots, everything's lined up. Everything. One thing leading to another.
Rana, you grew up in Beirut and you moved out of Beirut to go and study design in London. What was your childhood like?
I was surrounded by art and culture because my father's an architect and my mother is an intellectual. She studied in New York at Vassar and then she taught at Harvard and then went back to Cairo to teach at the American University English literature. And she valued the arts and the Middle East. She was Palestinian who grew up in the States and then went back to the Middle East and eventually taught at the American University in Beirut where she met my father. And my father is a wonderful Bauhaus trained architect who was taught in Cambridge. And again, same thing, went back to the Middle East to rebuild and modernize and allow people to value their culture through architecture. So I come from this combination of parents. Grew up in a house that was a wonderful old Lebanese house full of people. My father was always inviting people to come and enjoy his environment, see this kind of melange of Bauhaus architecture and furniture with Middle Eastern, furniture from Damascus, found pieces in Basta. And he always drove a Mercedes. So somewhere I think he wanted to be a Salvador Dali or something. So, yeah.
Do you think that when you went to London to study at Central St. Martin's, do you think that foreignness shaped your identity in a way and made you realize I'm gonna have to go back to the roots?
It was actually not at Central St. Martin's. Central St. Martin's was a wonderful introduction to the best art school in the world. But it was not there that they taught me to embrace the Middle East. It was actually at the Royal College of Art. I never thought that when I would apply to the Royal College to do my master's there, that they would guide me back to go to my roots and embrace it and celebrate it. I was like, what the hell? I came all the way to England to study graphic design and embrace the West, and you're sending me back to the Middle East where there's nothing? And they were like, use your eyes and explore on-ground research of how much wealth you have. And really, I was like every other Lebanese who was consumed by Western culture, consuming American culture, consuming British culture through magazines and food. And, this is the power of the West. It makes you believe that they are, everything. And it's another form of colonizing. So, and because of the result of the civil war, the Lebanese were leaving their country and kind of rebuilding their roots in other countries such as the UK, Paris, and the US. So food was the main kind of connection of exporting culture. So I was at the Morocco and I thought, my God, okay, let me just go back to Beirut and see what's happening as a result of the civil war through having learned what is visual communication. So when I went during that summer, did my thesis, which was titled Beirut Design under Civil War, I started to discover how much was happening in terms of quote unquote design by untrained designers. They were the real designers, which is basically solving problems. The role of a designer is to solve problems, and through design. So the designers were people who had their shops bombed. How would they recycle, turning prams into vehicles to sell products. The militias were doing posters to express their militia groups. So these were the graphic designers. So that's what led me to embrace the Sha'bi, which were the true designers on the ground.
Yeah.
And I would give them all credit. They were not trained, they did not go to art school, but they were expressing the country through visual communication. But I was one of the few that gave credit to the street, to the street culture that was generating amazing designs. And a lot of, there's usually snobbery around design. They would not give them credit because you have to go through art school. But true design, like I said again, it's about solving problems. It doesn't matter if you're from a master's at Royal College or from Burj Hamoud. It's the way you express it. And that charm of the uneducated was very powerful to give the city an identity. When you arrive from the airport, you don't see high-end, like when you arrive in Germany, you see high-end design. It's very much street, and it's very raw. And that's what I wanted to export to the West. I didn't want to export another colonized Lebanon. So I started exporting Sha'bi, and that was mesmerizing to the West. They loved it. And I thought I must be onto something.
For us, when we see the work that you do, when we see a poster from an old Egyptian film, or when we see Tahiyya Karaoke, Layla Murad,
yes,
it could trigger feelings of nostalgia because at some point, we grew up, watching them on TV. So as an Arab, it feels very nostalgic, it feels familiar, but at the same time, it's fun, it's stylish, it's glamorous.
absolutely.
How was what was the reaction in a non-Arab audience, a Western audience, if you like?
Of course, I'm going to use the word exotic. It's exotic, and they love it. They love it. I mean, the West loves this exoticism,
Yeah.
Which has been a big debate from Edward Said to all of them. This exotic, erotic, Middle Eastern fantasy.
Yeah.
So I kind of played on that. I didn't mind it, but I felt I was allowed because I was the Arab doing it.
It's true.
So and it was very important for me to reinforce it and celebrate it, not just colonize. I keep on using that word. Maybe it's offensive, but I just felt I was allowed to do it. Now, at some point, people would criticize me because it wasn't really genuinely my work. I would take things that were found and I would preserve them and export them. So technically, as a designer, I'm supposed to create authentic work. But I felt it was my duty and my role to become a bit like the museum, where you collect, you preserve, you value, which is something they were not doing. All of this was not valued at all. So I was coming like a bit of the British Museum mentality or the V&A. Let's go, and how do you value a culture? By preserving it, by collecting it. And then you put your mark on it and you put a price on it. So because they don't have that mentality in the Middle East, there was a lot of a struggle in trying to do that. Because, like people would say, what? Egyptian poster? You're selling it for $500, for $2,000? How do you value something? If you keep on putting a dollar as a price to it, or you keep on trashing it will have no value. So this is what I was doing, collecting, preserving, And then the people that were valuing what I was doing is people like INEVA, the Institute of International Visual Art, being embraced by the V&A, being commissioned by Paul Smith, or Harvey Nichols. And when I was being praised by these people, then the Middle East started to value me.
No, that's really incredible.
Yeah.
Such a
So
typical story.
yeah, typical. But I will say that we cannot live without each other.
Yeah.
So that's the conclusion. We tried a lot to be independent, and that we don't need the West, but we need each other.
I'm going to go back in a second to the amazing collaborations you have done so far, but I just wanted to speak to you about this one thing. When it comes to the representation, so you spoke earlier about Edward Said, you spoke about how the Middle East is at best portrayed as exotic, at worst as savage. And what do you think of that issue of representation that we have in the West when it comes to Arabs in general?
It's propaganda. Totally. It's propaganda. It's playing on our weaknesses. I don't know if you know, there's a wonderful film in the States called The Real Bad Arab, REEL, as in how Arabs are positioned in cinema. As always the bad Arab, which is, they've done the same thing with black culture. So Hollywood was the most damaging. And the introduction of Arab cinema had a huge influence on how we portrayed. But Egyptian cinema also was very highly influenced by Hollywood, as you know.
Of course.
Yes. So later on, the Arabs started creating their own self-identity. Same thing with Nollywood, with African cinema. I was married to Keith Sheary, who specializes in African cinema. So bizarrely, we were working on the same thing. And he would promote African cinema through African eyes. Ousmane Sembène and Farid Bougadir from Tunisia. Beautiful cinema that was coming out from personal experiences and through personal identity, which was very important. So this was a movement, and I was part of it. Among is Hassan Hajjaj and many other artists at that period, but we were the few. Yusuf Nabil, So, yeah, this was, that's the movement that they brought. I didn't realize we were on a movement, but yes, we were.
But it is, and I also think it's very important because no one's going to come from outside and do that job.
Absolutely.
You need to shift the narrative. You need to show a different picture. You need to so it's an incredibly important task actually. So going back to the many collaborations that you have done. So you've collaborated with Comptoir Libanais in London. You've collaborated with Harvey Nichols by designing their windows, the V&A in London, with Paul Smith. Is there one collaboration in particular? I mean, these are all huge names, but is there one collaboration in particular that that felt special to you?
Yes, actually, the first thing that comes to mind is actually the brilliant Beirut exhibition that we did at during art, commissioned by Art Dubai for Dubai Design Week. It was the first Dubai Design Week, and we did it at D3. And it was the first time that somebody from that region commissions me to create and design the history of design in Lebanon from the 1950s to 2015, 7 decades of design, from architecture, product design, graphics, and interior. So I was so honored, and it was finally a platform that I could study and collect very valuable information that nobody has about our history, which I was hoping that eventually that we'd have a book about it so it can be shared at institutes and at design schools for the students to understand their roots. This book was never published. If anybody would be willing to come and publish, I'm very happy to do, because I'm the only one that collects this information. So this was a very honorable exhibition to illustrate the history of our design, where when we did this exhibition in Dubai, I brought tears to a lot of Lebanese to see suddenly, they could see a chronological history of their value. So it wasn't like Harvey Nichols, which was a wonderful capsule of window display that's related to retail, or Comptoir Libanais, which was a restaurant. This was really a very serious, art design exhibition that had a lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
So that was for me like the highlight.
Going back to the book you collaborated on, The Secret Life,
Yes.
Syrian lingerie, can you tell us a bit about the background story of that?
Oh my God, this was totally unexpected. Okay, I would spend many years traveling between London and Beirut via Damascus because I was, always trying to discover all that region, Egypt, Damascus, Jordan. Um, and I would go to the souks and stumble upon all this incredible lingerie design. And to arrive to the souk with like erotic, in your face, with no shame, no hiding, and men are shopping and women are shopping and everything. So I started to collect, and I was always fascinated from a design angle. Who the hell is designing these things? The mind of a designer so it was a bit anthropological. I collected and I collected with not knowing where this was going until I was at the British Council event in Beirut, and there was this wonderful lady called Malou Halassa who comes from editorial book publishing background. She used to work for Tank magazine, and we hit it off. And she was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I collect this lingerie," and she was like, "We gotta make a book." I was like, I had no clue that the book would take off. Malou knew how to capitalize on me and put me in the structure of a book. So if it wasn't for her, this would have never happened. So the book, she managed to structure it, organize it, and get the funding from the Prince Claus Fund. And that allowed us to go back, do on-ground research, meet people, get photographers. It was wonderful, wonderful. And the book, oh my God, I was like, why did I study graphic design? It was like the biggest hit. And it put me on an amazing platform.
I think it sold something like 5,000 copies and it's
10,000 copies, and it's out of print, and now it's like, I think $300 the copy or something like that.
so through your work, Rana, you've shed light on Arab divas, actresses, singers. What kind of relationship do you have to them?
Um, I was, for the first time, I didn't really indulge too much in watching Egyptian cinema. I was fascinated by portraits, how a face is so strong, and obviously it's been used a lot in pop culture, from the Warhols to Philippe Stark. I was always mesmerized how these designers would use a face that's like a map to a culture.
Mm-hmm.
A face is very, very important, very telling. A portrait is very, very powerful. So I learned and I picked that up and I applied it to our culture. And I would find these superb portraits of these divas that were, again, very neglected on magazines that were thrown away in Damascus and Cairo. Nobody was really, was really giving them value. I met an American who was collecting all of the stuff and would buy them back from him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, this American guy can't have our culture. He knew what he was on. He was buying them in the bulk. And I was like, no, he cannot have this. And then I was buying them back from him.
From him.
And then, yeah, and then it started to take off. So people would start to discover, and of course through the internet. So they realized what I was up to, and people were starting. So it became a competition. Who would capture the culture and put a price on it?
Yeah.
And at some point, I was not able to afford it because I was building my career. So it was not that I had an investor and lots of money. So as much, and I would make money, yalla, I would buy the next poster that was very, and I would buy posters on their charm, not just because it was an Egyptian poster. I was curating as I went along. Like I would buy a collection of love posters. So the minute I would find a poster that had a charming heart in it, I would add it to my collection. And my other collection was on the theme of belly dances. So the minute I would find one, I would add it to my collection. So suddenly I would have Egyptian posters on specific collections.
Mm-hmm.
Why love? Because love is a big drama in the Middle East. Why belly dances? Because it's pretty obvious. So I wouldn't collect posters that were to do with, I don't know, that were peripheral. I was fascinated by the theme of love, fascinated by belly dances, fascinated by just erotic women. So I was curating.
Um, so going back to the topic of Beirut and your relationship with Beirut. Rana, you have your own shop set up. So you live in Miami and you have a shop that is set up in Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
After the explosion that has happened,
Mm-hmm.
many Lebanese have given up on the country either by leaving
Absolutely.
or,
Yeah.
and but to you, you still have that hope. And could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Beirut?
My God, it's a bit painful today. I have to say it's painful. It's always been a wonderful love affair. It's made me who I am. I guess like all relationships, now it's a bad patch. We're going through a bad patch. um, but I haven't given up on it. I have not divorced it at all. I will not. I will constantly harness that connection, and I feel that my duty now is to still export it. I'm back to exporting it because when I left London and I came back here, I was bringing back all my knowledge and I was trying to build a
Yeah,
sense of understanding of what I was doing and for people around me. So I spent 12 years doing that, and that chapter became a bit rocky at the end. Not because of my relationship with Bill, but just, yes, I mean, I don't know. It's like when somebody enters a marriage and it kind of disrupts things, or the location, whatever it is. So I'm taking a step back away from it, trying to see how I can export it now to America. I did it very well towards London, Paris, Dubai, and the Khalij. I feel the States is still a virgin territory because if you Google today Arab or Arab pop or Arab, you should see the images that come out are so stereotyped, are so nothing, nothing sophisticated. So I was actually, yeah, up for the challenge. And it is very challenging because the States is a very different dynamic.
definitely. That's what I was going to say. Do you feel like,
Very, yes.
yeah,
I mean, it's been, especially with Miami, I mean, it's this, and with the Jewish culture. I have to come to that topic. It's been very, very interesting. I've been actually very welcomed and embraced. They're very interested and very curious, maybe because of my personality. I don't, which is a plus. I am not a threat. I, I smartly present myself. I'm gregarious, I'm colorful, but I'm a little bit, you know, I'm smartly trying to ingrain myself into that group. A bit like what Ottolenghi did in London with Sami Tamimi, with food. You know, it was quite an interesting melange. It was political. And I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to introduce the Middle East to the Jewish culture. You know, it's and to the Americans, of course, but it's I don't want to be a threat. I want them to be like, oh my God, this is amazing.
and to
It's been
finally, to finally get to be represented. And it is, I mean, let's just hope for change, because I really do think that although we have no control about the socio-political elements that are happening in our own countries, at least we could have a bit of control about how reality is represented, about preserving all culture, presenting all culture. So, and there is a lot of power in representation. I mean, you spoke earlier also about Hollywood.
yes,
It's not a small thing, the power of representation,
image.
of image, exactly. Um, so I want to ask you, Rana, so behind this joyous, colorful personality of yours, is there a more serious Rana?
Yes, of course, it all comes from seriousness.
Yeah, it has to.
The 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 colorful, gregarious personality is a way of reaching people to get uh, to that message. I do it through humor, but of course there's a seriousness behind it. Of course, it's very political, but I do it very well. People don't know that. It's a bit like a spy. Yes, because the people see colors and see fun stuff, and they don't understand that it's all about changing people. It's political. It's changing people's perception through design. And I always say there's a thin line between design and politics. You know, people think design is tra-la-la and something pretty and fun and, you know, but no, design is finding solutions to problem. And I have a problem that the Middle East has been portrayed in such a negative way. So that's my solution, is through pop culture. And it's not pop culture, as in I'm sick and tired of people saying, oh, Andy Warhol. It's not. It's the philosophy of pop culture. Just the understanding. Of course, Warhol is the king, but there are many other pop artists, and I learned the tools of pop, how the tools of how to use pop to celebrate and attract, and but it's a movement.
And it's an important one too.
Yes, very much so. I mean, you know, there are other designers that are doing this intellectual, you know, slick black and white, whatever. But I think color is a very attractive medium and
And it also
large.
breaks
Yeah,
boundaries. It makes people more approachable.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Rana, who's your role model?
Oh my gosh, role model. My father, maybe. My father, role model. Uh, I mean, I'm his really. I always say I give him. I'm his student.
And your father was a very famous architect as well.
Yes, and he really like he had a huge influence on how I am. Or he, I think I was his l'enfant terrible. He was very serious, kind of, you know, Bauhaus, Cambridge educated, and Panama hat. So he gave me a Vespa when I was 15, and I think he really wanted to be me. And like what they say in Arabic, they say فشيت له خلقه. Like I was, yeah, the part that he really wanted to be on the streets of Beirut and talking to people, and he was very austere, and he had a cigar, so people he would kind of scare people a little bit. So I was the other one who was,
Yeah. Were
yeah,
you like a reaction to that?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, totally. I hated I remember when in Beirut in the house, he designed this very Bauhaus austere dining table, and we'd all be sitting there, like, and he would be at the head of the table. I would hate it. So I would much prefer go and sit at my friend's neighbors eating tabbouleh on the, you know, we would be all seated on the ground, and it's a family of 10 kids, and I
Yeah.
felt far more at home there.
It's as if you repackaged him into something more colorful as well.
Yes, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Rana, what is your life motto?
Play, play, play.
Not to take life seriously.
Yeah, you have to play. You know, it's no, in a way, playing is not. It's not. No, no, playing, taking life seriously is. I do somewhere because I have a mission. And when I say play, it's very important to keep on discovering, um, to keep that child in you, which is many artists, like from Alexander Calder, he always insisted to be a child.
Yeah.
Picasso, it's very important because you're not using your mind. It's when you remain a child, when you're working, it's that it all comes from your heart.
Yeah.
The minute you use your mind, you become intellectual and very grown up, which
And
is
it
what
kills
happened.
creativity.
Yeah, my father was like that, very grown up.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm l'enfant terrible.
Yeah. Um, any dreams for the future still?
Um, to conquer the states with my work. I think there's a lot of room to do that. It's very, yeah, I'm glad that I'm in that chapter because it keeps me alive. I feel I still have a lot of homework to do to become the design ambassador of the Middle East.
I really, really do hope so. I'm crossing my fingers.
So if
I
nobody's
really
going to give me that title, I'm giving it to myself.
Um, so last question, Rana. When you mentioned it earlier, when you were 15, your father gave you a scooter, and on this scooter you were,
Mm,
or a Vespa, and on it you started your journey into discovering Beirut, getting to know Beirut,
mm,
its neighborhoods, and
mhm.
today you're still running around with a Vespa, right?
Yes, yes, I do. Actually, yesterday it broke down in the middle of the street. I was like, "What the hell?" I just landed. Yeah. So, but the beauty of it, 10 people came to the rescue. This would never happen in Miami or London. Like all
Yeah.
the shabab, like, "Madame, Madame."
Are you making that little girl proud?
Of course, super now, very much so. And she's still a little girl, like going around at 56 on my Vespa. I forget my age completely. Just
No.
hopefully my body doesn't give up on me.
My conversation with you, Rana, was like a ray of sunshine.
Nah, thank you.
And I'm so thankful that I got to speak to you, and let's keep working to change perceptions one step
Yes,
at a time.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nemo. It's been wonderful to be on your podcast.
Thank you, Rana.